Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashrothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is January 21st, YC128, and this is the Eve Universe Show. Welcome, 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 guys. How's it going? It is Wednesday? Is it Wednesday? I think it's Wednesday. It is Wednesday, and we are back once again on the stream, and I feel like I'm coming home, because I am back in faction warfare. This is... Why is my camera so dark, though? Hold on, let me see if I can adjust this real quick. Let's see. Ooh, no. I tried this earlier. I'm just going to need better lighting. I'm going to need better lighting. That's what it really boils down to. Boo. Okay, well. Let's see if I can... Nope, that's going to make my face disappear. All right, well, shoot. This is not as great as I would have liked it to be. I make this brighter? What happens if I go, wah? Nope. All right. Well, not perfect. Gotta get new lighting. All right. How's it going? 07, guys. We are back into faction warfare. We want to try this out today. You look greenish. You need to go Galmel. It's true. I actually originally was Galmel, but today we're going to be doing some Minmatar. Settling in. What is with the Vanguard plot post? I don't actually know yet, right? Because, like, man, nobody actually pointed this out to me last time. I feel like the Gardener is a person that we've heard talked about before. I want to say it was part of the Vanguard, like, tasks from the last event, because they introduced a couple new characters then. But I don't know 100% on that one, so I'm not sure. We're just gonna have to keep close tabs on that. But in the meantime, we are in Eve. I'm sorry, guys. I have a minor headache today, and I also stayed up way too late last night trying PAX Dei, which, by the way, so okay. Before we jump into the Eve stuff, I do want to point out that, like, so some of the people who made EVE Online, like CCP guys, left CCP and they made this different game called PAX Dei, which is kind of like an EVE-ish kind of game where it's like this open sandbox with like with crafting and stuff. But it also it's medieval, and we picked it up last night because they're doing a free thing on Steam for the next like couple of days. So if people are interested in me checking that out on my Decanted channel, please let me know. We can check it out. Otherwise, I guess I'll just be poking at it for a couple of days and see what I think and maybe let you guys know. But let's see. I think we don't have any real big news to talk about today, right? There was a patch. There was a patch, but it wasn't anything too specific. If I remember correctly, there's no news on New Eden News. There is that Plex sale still going on. Let's see, there was something in the patch notes, but it was like all graphic stuff. Nothing too fascinating. They fixed some stuff with the Atavum trader, and they made Project Discovery harder and fixed some special effects. That's what I know from there. 8 hours ago, we did get a patch, and it did include 2 files, but it doesn't look like it is anything worth talking about. Okay, great. So, do it. Collab with Marquis. I didn't know that Marquis streams it. I know very little about the game. We kind of poked at it yesterday, jumping into it blind. But all right, faction warfare. Why am I doing faction warfare today? Well, first of all, we did a vote, as we do now I think every Sunday, or we're going to try to do every Sunday with our anybody who's a supporter. So if you have a member status on YouTube, you can I post it to all of the members and they vote on it, and Faction Warfare won. So it took us an extra day to get into Faction Warfare. It does take you can get into Faction Warfare one of two ways. You can either direct enlist, which does require you to have positive standings, at least positive 0.001 with the faction that you're attempting to join, or you can always join a Faction Warfare Corp or have your Corp or Alliance join Faction Warfare. Then what matters is your overall average standings with the empire that you're joining. And that is unmodified, so no standings or no skills can be modifying that. But once you're in, why would you want to join? Well, as a newer player, I actually have always said that Faction Warfare is the best place for new players and the best place for solo pilots, small gang PvP pilots, etc. to make ISK and fight. It's like the only place in the game that has a built-in mechanism for you to make money and fight at the same time. A lot of the time, for years, I'd listen to nullsec people complain about the absence of small gang PvP, the absence of the N+1, the blobbing, and all this sort of stuff. And why isn't there better content drivers when Faction Warfare has always existed during that time and was always great? In fact, covering Faction Warfare and trying to explain to people that Faction Warfare is actually kind of great was one of the very first things I ever got into when it came to streaming and making content. So there was actually some improvements to Faction Warfare recently. Obviously, the Uprising expansion was a big update, and I actually did a Faction Warfare guide that is still up from then that kind of updated everybody on how Faction Warfare works. But there has been some updates since then. And also, I just really, really like Faction Warfare. So we're going to dive into this. Why do I think it is the best place for new players, solo players, and PvP players to engage with the game? Well, so Faction Warfare does a few things. One, it concentrates people's focus on specific areas. So if we can open up the map real quick. We open up the map real quick. Not that map. We open up the Faction Warfare map real quick, we can see that the war zone itself is limited. This is the Gallente Mimitar, or sorry, this is the Mimitar Amar war zone. And then over here we have the Gallente Caldari war zone, and we can see over here in the count that the Gallente Caldari war zone has about 90 systems. The Mimitar Amar war zone has about 70 systems. So, rather than 5,000 systems, everything's kind of concentrated into these war zones. But also you can see that there's different systems have different colors on them. And that's because the different systems can have different states. There is what's called a frontline system, operations center, and then there's a rear guard. So the way it works is that if a system is adjacent to an enemy system, so if an Amar system is adjacent to a Mimitar system or vice versa, then that system is a frontline. If the system is not adjacent to an enemy system, but is adjacent to an allied frontline, then it is a command operations post, or command, what is it called? Command operations. And if it is not adjacent to an enemy system or a frontline, then it is a rear guard. Okay. So, and front lines have bonus LP for completing sites, and others bonus payouts, because your primary payout for Faction Warfare is loyalty points. So basically there's a multiplier for running sites inside of a frontline system. And there's a pretty big penalty to running Faction Warfare sites in a rearguard system. So, and then also, like, it used to be that it mattered whether or not you were doing an offensive plex or a defensive plex. In other words, if you were running a plex in a system that was already owned by your alliance or faction versus an enemy faction. That is the biggest change that has happened since the last time I largely covered faction warfare, because now rear guards and defensive plexing and offensive plexing are effectively the same when it comes to reward and difficulty, because now the rats that spawn inside the site, both sides will now spawn. It used to be that only one rat spawned, and that was for the owning system. So if you were in faction warfare, or if you were in an allied system, if you were in a friendly system and running a plex, you actually didn't need to kill the rat at all, which killing the rat is necessary to run the timer. And therefore complete the site. So it used to be that you didn't actually need to kill the rat in order to do defensive plexing, which means that ships that don't even need guns can run defensive plexing, but the reward was significantly lower. And then offensive plexing obviously required you to kill the rat. Now, both offense and defense plexing does require you to kill rats. And the rats now have a potential to have a warp disruptor. So there is a chance that something goes horribly, horribly wrong and you can't escape the way that you would want to under normal conditions. Both of those changes were made, but then the reward for running the site was also changed to make it so that it's the same if you're defensive plexing or offensive plexing, unless the system is either completely vulnerable or completely stable. What does that mean? Well, you're running these sites, right? So the way it works is that there's all these different combat sites that we call plexes. And the plex has like an outside gate, and that, well, all but the open plexes have an outside gate. And then inside of that, they have kind of this this structure that you have to stay within 30 kilometers of and make sure that there are no hostile forces within 30 kilometers of it. And then there's a timer that will tick down. And so it's basically a king of the hill, right? You just have to hold the site long enough and kill the enemy rats. And then at the end of the site, you get paid out in LP, right? So that you're doing it for the loyalty points. But for your actual faction, this also increases what's called the victory points in the system, which changes the contested value of the system. So we can see here, like, for instance, is Barbata, is currently 47% contested. So it's owned by the Minmatar at the moment, but it is 47.1% contested. So if someone was to finish a site, I think every site is worth approximately, I think it's 0.6%. So, you know, as people run these sites, the system will go higher and higher and higher. Once it gets to 100% contested, the system becomes vulnerable, which means that the infrastructure hub can be attacked by the assaulting faction. And if that iHub is flipped or brought down to 99% hull, then it goes back into reinforce and the system flips over to the other side. That's how system control is kind of flipped. And then likewise, if you defensive plex to the point of getting it all the way back down to 0%, then it becomes stable. So in this case, the reason why this is important is because if a system is stable, you cannot defensive plex in it for LP. You won't get anything for it. Likewise, if the system is vulnerable, you will not get any LP for offensive plexing it. It is still theoretically important to offense plex a system that is vulnerable if you are planning to attack it, because you can plex a certain number of percent above 100%. And that's important because if you start bashing and the enemy manages to pull it out of 100%, out of vulnerable, it resets the entire attack. So oftentimes you might want to do some offensive plex over and above, but that is unrewarded. There is no LP to that. Okay. So the other reason why so my point is that these sites are good places to get rewards in PvP setups and in scenarios, right? That's that first piece. Like, you get to make money while PvPing. That's pretty cool. The second part of it is that the sites themselves are actually broken into size categories. So if we go into opportunities, we can probably... Is it going to be? Yeah, faction warfare. If we go into opportunities, we can go into faction warfare, or if we go into the agency under encounters, I think it is, we can find faction warfare. In both of these cases, we can look at the systems and see what kind of sites are there, right? So if we look at Israbada, which is that site that we were just looking at, it's highly contested. Well, there's a scout right now, and there's a battlefield. Battlefields are a big deal. In fact, they're enough of a big deal, I might stop talking really quick and go and see what's going on there. Let's just go, and then we can keep talking. Oh, wait. Before I go, I need to set this as my home station, and also... what else do I need to do? I think that's it, right? Yeah. It's been a while. All right, and let's just pop over to this version, so that way we can see my... As someone who's in the Vanguard community, I personally don't think the garden is connected with recent events. However, I do know that the garden is an artificial forest built by Sora Foroten. Huh? Well, yeah. Well, there are other... That's one of the problems with looking up or getting information about what's currently going on with the gardener, is the fact that, like... So, the gardener is not like a new phrase. In fact, the head of Hasiota, one of the mega corporations, Hatakana, I think is her name. She famously kind of maintains a garden in Templar 1 and elsewhere. And so, like, when you're looking up stuff about the gardener, it's really easy to accidentally, like, get stuff from previous references to gardens and gardeners and stuff like that. So it's hard to say exactly. Web? No, unfortunately, this build doesn't get to have a web. So I do like... This is one of my favorite ships for faction warfare. I've talked about it before. This is my Nephthys build for the Algos. It comes with a scram and an afterburner cap booster. It is hull tanked, so it's got mostly transverse bulkheads and a damage control, but it does have an ancillary armor repper for some extra hit points. And it's got the 3 guns and 3 newts. It basically is... the... It is the whole new Tristan, but with 3 extra guns strapped to the side. And a little bit better drones. So battlefields are big events that happen in faction warfare every couple of hours. You can see that there's a battlefield there, right? Like, this is the only location of a battlefield at the moment. They are big. They allow battleships in, and they reward up to 30 people, and they require a lot of people to make it happen. So I have no idea whether or not, like, this is even being run, or whether or not there are friendlies involved. Obviously, I'm not going to take it on by myself in an Algos. We're just coming to check it out. See if there's anything interesting to poke at. Oh. Nope. It looks like this is not going to work out for me. So yeah, Amar Militia is the ones... Oh, there's a Sino, though. I gotta go check out what the Sino is. So it is worth noting that as a member of Faction Warfare, you're not allowed to dock in systems in the war zone that are owned by enemy faction unless it is a front line. Front lines allow everybody to dock, but like in other systems... Oh boy. Oh, they're all at the Sino. They're all docking up. Dominix's. Hello. Whoa! Hey, let's not let that happen. What the fuck just hit me? Woo! Thank God I'm hull tanked. Thank God I'm hull tanked. Let's not stay here. Shit, I need to turn on my Eve sounds. You guys didn't hear all my alarms go off all at the same time. What the hell was that? That was a Tempest Navy issue hitting me with artillery. Oh boy, I'm so glad that guy glanced. $3,000 damage from one shot. Let's not fuck around and find out. Oh my god. No, that was just that was 3 shots total. I'd seen the Dominic's, so I was like, oh yeah, you know, this should be fine. This system's owned by us. Oh boy, I'm in danger. All right. Well, that was fun. So one of the nice things, basically, okay, going back to a little bit of what I was saying earlier, the reason why faction warfare is really good for newer players is because, unlike battlefields, most sites are like size gated pretty significantly. So if we open back up our faction warfare page, can we do this? Does this work? No, that doesn't quite work. If we open up our agency, nope, agency. That was not stream sniping. That was me being an idiot. That's some fire. Where's my firebob? There he is. Okay, so if we go here, we can see that in this system there is a scout, right? Scouts allow only frigates in, okay? Then there's also smalls that allow destroyers, mediums that allow cruisers, large that allows... uh-oh, now that I'm thinking about it. Larges allow battleships, right? Yeah. And then, yeah, larges allow battleships, and then opens do not have a gate and therefore do not have restrictions. But what this means is that to be versatile, to run all of the different sites, basically the smaller you are and still can run the site, the better off you are, right? Because like a frigate can run all of the different sites, but like this Algos, sure, I have enough damage to be able to run the higher tier sites, and that's good, but I can't run a scout, right? The system is Rabata, when we came in here, I couldn't run to the scout to hide because I'm in a destroyer, not a frigate. If I was in a frigate, I could go do the destroyer. So, oof, that was spicy. So I don't need a frontline per se. I just need a system that is contested. The Asset has 2 medium plexes, but then there's 2 other pieces. There's the size, which affects what size of ship is allowed in it. So a medium plex would allow a cruiser. But then there's NVY or ADV. NVY stands for Navy, which means only standard Tech 1 and Navy ships are allowed in, whereas ADV are advanced and they allow Tech 1 and Tech 2 ships in, with Tech 3 requiring one size category higher than normal. So a Tech 3 destroyer would require medium, a Tech 3 cruiser would require a large in order to get in. So the other thing is that like these Navy plexes, which are pretty common in standard faction warfare, make it so that the Navy ship line, like the Navy issue ship line, are some of the most effective ships in those plexes, right? Which is good because the Navy ship line is what faction warfare is going to reward you in a lot of the time, because that's one of the biggest prizes for the loyalty point store, is that you can build that that faction's navy ships, right? So like I could build with Mimitar faction warfare, I could build Thrasher. Yeah, advanced means pirate as well. Yes. So advanced means any ship of that size category, Tech 1, Tech 2. Tech 3 is one size, needs to be one size category lower than the site in order to make it in. And then the number at the end specifies how many people can are required to get the maximum reward, right? So if I go into this site, I'm going to get all of the loyalty points that are available in this site when I finish it. If someone else comes into the site before it's over and they're there at the end, then we will both split the reward evenly. In the case of, looks like a lot more of the sites are going to be these -1s now, mostly because it used to be that there was a lot more -5s, but a lot of people did multi-boxing. Fraternity did multi-boxing, so they got adjusted. So now instead of all being -5s, they like this medium is a -3, and the large is a -4. So what that means is that if I come into this site and I run this site, I will get my reward. If a second person comes into the site, we will both get a full reward for the site. If a third person comes into site, we will get, all three of us will get the full reward for the site. If a fourth person comes in, well then the total reward available will be divided amongst the four of us. So just for ease of math, let's just say that a medium complex, it says here it's worth 40,000 LP, but we're going to just say, just for the purposes of discussion, it's 10,000 LP. So if I go in and I succeed, I will get 10,000 LP. If a second person comes in, we will both get 10,000 LP. If a third person comes in, all three of us will get 10,000 LP. If a fourth person comes in, then 30,000 LP, right? 10,000 times 3 will be divided among all 4 players. So, you know, whatever that ends up being, it's like what, 8 or so, 8,000 LP. And so that is kind of the main reward for faction warfare. And then if you want to know more about how to get that, or how to get the most out of it, there's a couple of tools that I want to show to you guys. This is the faction warfare map from Aderon.org. And it shows the militias, both militias, and it shows like a whole bunch of cool information. Basically, there is a Frontline's website, which now that I just realized, I don't know why I don't have it here. Hold on. How do I change this? So we have this Frontlines, eveonline.com/frontlines, and it does also have a live combat map, right? But this is basically the same as what is in the game. So it'll show you the current contested value and the advantage of the system. Advantage is a separate system that we haven't really talked about yet. But it basically affects how much your stuff, that what you do, will control the contested value, right? So a higher advantage means that you'll make more progress either towards making the system stable or vulnerable, depending on which side you're on at the time. You will make more progress if you have a higher advantage. But we're working on an individual level right now, so we're not really worried about that. But so this has the current state of the war zone, but the Aderon map, what they do is they pull the data every 15 minutes, and then they compare it with previous versions of the data. So the reason why this is important is because this can help you detect where sites are actually being run, right? I can see here and see that like Aga has had a change in the last 15 minutes and towards the Amar, but a larger change in the last 24 hours towards the Mimitar. So people are getting work done there. But like Azure has a change in Amar direction, actually a pretty large change in the last 24 hours comparatively. So that might be an interesting system to go check out. If I was to try to like go and figure out where people are attacking. Again, a lot of this has to do with more of a kind of meta organizational level understanding of things. You know, if you're trying to control the war zone, knowing where attacks are happening at any given time, that's why this tool was originally built. But even as an individual pilot, you can use this as a bit of intel to kind of see where things are happening. There's a kill feed over here. That's cool. You can also, of course, go to Zkill to look for kills to see what's going on. But you end up being rewarded with LP. You can come to fuzzworks.co.uk/LP store in order to find your corporation's LP. And so I'm doing the Tribal Liberation Force because that's the Mimitar. And we can see that there are several decent options for LP. Although, remember, these low 5% volumes, you probably want to skip over them. But look at this. Titanium SIBO L is 4,000 ISK per LP. That's insane. That's insane. That's probably almost a too good to be true, but it does have a really large volume. You also have Navy Cap Booster 75s, which are always a good generic to dump your LP into, at 5,641 ISK per LP. If you want to go more towards the ships, which obviously you can always use your own ships or you can sell them. They're going to be a little bit more modest in how much ISK per LP they are. But, you know, you can see that the probe is 15,000. The Thrasher is 13,000. 1,000 ISK per LP is often considered to be fairly decent. But as you can see, like, if you are aggressive about your LP, you can get more than that. But even then, 1,000 ISK per LP, just to remind you, like if we go back to here real quick, we can see like this site is worth 40,000 LP. 1,000 ISK per LP. That means that this site is worth 40. Oh wait, hold on. I'm so dumb. That's not what that means, right? No, that's not what that means at all. That's not what that means at all. That is a totally separate system that almost doesn't matter anymore. So we're going to ignore that. We will go look at how much LP we get per site. But the point of the matter is that you get a lot. You get like, it's a really good like return on investment, especially given the fact that most of the time you're using fairly cheap ships, right? Like this ship, even though it's kind of spooky that I got shot, if we look at the fit itself, it's only 22 million ISK. So I would need to run like one, maybe two sites in order to make up the ISK for one of these ships. So this is one of those things. It's like, even if you do lose ships doing this, as long as you're running the sites, you actually will probably end up making more than you are spending. So we're just going to get into this Plex so we can start talking about it and maybe see what's going on. We do have an enemy in local. So now the biggest thing about faction warfare and really low sec in general is the need to understand directional scanner, right? Directional scanner is the #1 tool for low sec and null sec. But like people say like, what do I need to be ready for low sec? The answer is know how to directional scan. If you understand how to directional scan, you can pretty much do low sec. If you don't know how to directional scan, kind of doesn't matter what you bring into low sec, you're already in danger. So there's two major ways of doing, well, not two, there's kind of three major, hold on. Let me put out my drones, get to fighting. So there's three major configurations that I use D-scan in this case. I keep it right now at 1%, 1 AU, 360 degrees. So that way I can see if anything comes to my grid. Hey, what's up, friends and Ragtag? Ragtag's recently joined us in Raid Shadow Legends and has been kicking ass. I'm so glad to have you with us. And then I'm going to make sure that I have a good filter here. So basically, at this point, no one can come into this Plex without me knowing about it. This is a big piece. So as a new player, I can feel comfortable with what fights I take and I don't take, right? Because, like, in order for somebody to even come into this site, they have to first get on the gate, and I'll see them then. And then I can make a choice of whether or not I want to stay or not once that happens. But also, remember, this Plex is gated. So I know for a fact, given the fact that this is a medium navy, that the biggest, scariest thing that can come into this site is a navy cruiser, right? So for instance, when I first came in here, you might not have caught it, but there was a Orthrus out in space somewhere. Once I got inside of this site, I knew I was safe from the Orthrus because the Orthrus can't come in. The Orthrus is a pirate cruiser. Likewise, this Synesis, I'm pretty sure the Synesis still technically counts as like a faction or like a pirate, a non-navy ship. So I'm pretty sure the Synesis can't even get in here either. Although they're not within range, so it's not a big deal. So this offers me a lot of like both safety in deciding what kind of fights I want to take versus not take, but also it makes sure that I just don't get completely overwhelmed. There's only a certain amount of power level that can come into the site. So, you know, if you're a brand new player, even if you're just flying frigates, you can then go into scouts and know that the only thing else that can come into that site with you are other frigates. In fact, other Navy frigates, because I don't think there's any advanced scouts. So, you know, this is a great opportunity for newer players, you know, to get out there. And especially those lower tier sites, they still give pretty good rewards, and you know, they don't take much to actually run them. But as far as like the value to your empire and the amount of LP and stuff that you get, they're basically just as good as the other sites. So you can absolutely just come in here as a frigate or a destroyer or whatever and get some work done. And the other nice thing is, because of the environment that goes, pretty much any all kinds of different fits and builds. There's no like limit. See, this is the new thing. There's actually new rats show up. It used to be that there'd only be one rat and they show up one at a time, and there's only the empire that owns the site. Now there's two rats on both sides, and you have to kill them both. This does a couple of things. The biggest thing it does is it makes it so that regardless of whether or not you're offensive plexing or defensive plexing, you have to kill the rat, which means that you can no longer just plex without any guns at all, which is which is really good. But the other thing that's kind of interesting is that, like, so the Algos in particular has gotten a lot of hate in faction warfare recently, especially when it comes to like multi-boxers and stuff, because it's kind of AFKable, and more importantly, like a guy, you can 5-box these guys and kind of all slave them off to one dude. And so, you know, you can multi-box these drone boats very, very effectively. But what's interesting is that because of the fact that there is enemy rat or allied rats with the enemy rats, that means that there's a pretty decent chance that when the rats show up, they attack each other, which means that your drones don't auto-attack. So it's a little bit more frustrating, or a little bit more work for people who are trying to like be fully AFK. That said, I've always loved the whole new Tristan and the Algos, even before it became kind of the popular multi-boxing ship for this. Mostly, honestly, a big reason why I prefer these boats for my faction warfare Especially if I'm doing faction warfare to get work done. Not to find fights, but actually to run plexes. If I'm not expecting to take a whole bunch of fights, if I'm expecting to be out here running plexes for a while without any problems, then I'm going to prefer a drone boat because it doesn't take any ammo, right? If you notice, I do have guns, but I'm not using them against these rats. I'm only using my drones. Always keep an eye on the number in local. Only frigates might be able to enter the site, but 30 frigates can make short work of you. Yes, but also you're still going to want to keep track of D-scan and realize that, like, just assume that on the other side of any given gate, there is a stack of like 20 dudes. So, you know, if I saw a Vexor Navy issue or whatever, actually, I don't know if I'd take a fight with a Vexor Navy issue with an Algos anyways, but even if I found like an Atron, I'd probably still go for it just in case. But, you know, if you see just like a frigate or something like that on your gate, and then you're wanting to take the fight, at the moment of taking the fight, as he's landing, as you're most distracted by the start of the fight, that's when you're absolutely going to want to pay attention in local. Because basically the scout will hit the gate, and as soon as they hit the gate, the rest of the people will start to jump in. Because it's kind of a race, right? They have to get to you before you kill the Atron, or whatever the tackle frigate is. But they don't want to tip you off that there's a giant fleet coming. So you got to watch for like big local spikes right as the fight is starting, because if the target is a scout, that's what they're going to do. Now, I do have one more target in system. I do like to keep things at a very wide scan just to see what's out there at 360 degrees. That was so there's the three configurations are basically 1 AU or shorter. Actually, you can go all the way down to like 100,000 or 200,000 K. Okay, so I have a Vigil Fleet issue on short. So that might be what the guy coming in. Let's go ahead and overheat my shit. Here he is. Here he is. Now, with this fit, I definitely want to, like, wait till I take some damage. Oh, he's got out of my range. Now I'm taking a lot more damage, so I'm going to run my Repper. I'm probably going to die. This is that dual web one, isn't it?
The capacitor is empty.
Maybe. No, no way.
A module has run out of charges.
Nope, I died. Good fight, good fight, good fight.
Active.
Vigil fleet issues can be really strong. So there, if I had had the correct ammo in, then I would have won, probably. So, GF and local. The problem there was he's dual web, and he's dual web, so he's able to keep me at range. And I was set up with Void. If I had had my Null in, I would have killed him. Now, again, I didn't have to take that fight. I could have left the fight. I wanted the fight. It was fun. And I got a quick little fight. See? So all those guys complaining about you not being able to find fights, not being able to do stuff. Faction warfare. That's what it's all about. We're less than one side in. We already got a good fight. And we also found out how out of practice I am.
Warp drive active.
Ash giving us a do as I do, do as I say, not as I do stream. Well, no, I think that it's important especially after a loss, but after every single fight, to analyze what you could have done better, right? I didn't, that's how you recover from such things, right? If you're watching me for perfect piloting, I'm not sure what to say to you. Practice makes perfect, as it were. So the Vigil Fleet issue is a great ship, as you can see. Again, like, the biggest reason why I didn't go with the Vigil Fleet issue was because ammo. But you can see, like, that was a very great demonstration of a ship punching above its weight class. But again, I'm pretty sure if I had just had Null... Void was very greedy. I don't even know why I had Void on. I think because I was expecting to have to break the rats.
Docking permission requested.
And that is true. Just in general with blaster boats, is just remember that Void is like the greediest ammo in the whole game. I wonder if a Cat Navy issue would be worth using as a new recruit. Absolutely. Oh yeah, no. All of the Navy destroyers are fantastic. And again, the nice thing is that you get the resources to build them by doing the plexus. Like, that's your main reward. We have the Breacher. I do have Vigil Fleet issues. So this is probably pretty close to what they had, right? And we can see that I was not actually that close to killing him then. If he's a hull tanked Vigil Fleet issue, I was not as close to killing him as I thought I was, which is one of the things I love about hull tanks, is that they're so deceptive, right? They convince you that you've almost killed them when you really, really haven't. Who am I killing? At the moment, myself. I need nanite repair paste. Uh-oh. How do I not have nanite repair paste? Does this have nanite repair? This does have nanite repair paste. Let's go with 100. Nope, that's 1,000. Let's go. Good to go. There's that. So here, I've got 217 DPS with that Vigil Fleet issue. As opposed to the Algos. I still think with Null, I would have killed the Algos, or with the Vigil Fleet issue, don't get me wrong. I'm so glad WoW's pre-patch turned out to be a white fart. There you go. Who am I killing? Whoever wants to show up. So this Algos, if I had Null in, it would have done 369 DPS. Nice. But Null would have been better, and it would have been 350 DPS. So... Oh, wait, no. Hold on. That's only that one ammo, or that one... thing. So now it's 313 DPS, but I would have gotten it at range. I think that, yeah, it would have increased my DPS by about 1/3. So probably would have been pretty good. I kind of want to try it again with this one. Yeah, let's try this. Just me, or the Mimitar really doing well nowadays? Yeah, I mean, so for various reasons, the Mimitar and Amar Warzone has a tendency to oscillate pretty aggressively, where the Galente Caldari Warzone tends to be a little bit more of a grudge match, with an advantage towards the Caldari at the moment, or for the last several years. But yeah, no, the well, actually, it's pretty even at the moment, honestly. Like, Mimitar have 36 systems, but The Amar have this entire southern section, and the Mimitar have the entire northern section, except for this one system. Now, one of the things that's worth noting is you can see some of these systems have... Well, no, not necessarily here. There are some systems, like for instance, this system here, even if this system was taken by the MR, it would still be a Frontline, because this high-sec system is owned by the Mimitar. So this system can never be a rearguard for the MR. All right, let's see. There's medium advanced one. I hate medium advanced ones and large advanced ones because they can have recon ships. I mean, hate is a strong word, but I'm always sus about them. Where was I? I was in a set, right? Yeah. Let's go back to where I was exactly and see if that person is still there. Especially since he wanted to fight me at scram range. Let's see. This is going to hit him a lot better than the Void did. And I wish my newts reached out a little bit further, because he was getting outside of my newt range. But if you remember, I mean, like, the only thing that the newts are going to shut off are the webs. So... Well, no, the Repper. It can shut off the Repper. My point is that this ship is a lot better off against people who require cap. But now I have the disadvantage, right? Before, I was able to, like, sit on the Plex right where he was, or right where I knew he was going to come in. Now he has the advantage if he chooses to stay, where I am coming into him. He did not stay. So if he wanted to, like, kite me out, theoretically he would have been better off there, but he didn't stay. So now I'm going to go back in. I do want to set my Repper to auto reload off, because basically if it goes into reload during combat, it's gone for the rest of combat. Frigates and destroyers do not survive. The fight usually doesn't last 30 seconds or more. Well, I mean, like this, you'd have to, like, cycle you'd have to rep all of its reps and then cycle, and then 30, 45 seconds later, it'd rep again. That's just too much time. So I set it to auto reload off, so that way it only reloads when I absolutely want it to. And that way, even if it does, like, run out of paste, I at least get something out of it instead of nothing. So I'm at 9 minutes and 17 seconds. He obviously didn't stay very long, nor did he kill rats. And hey, I can even go loot my own wreck. That's handy. And he left my drones here? Really did not want the loot. So there's 4 million ISK. Plus I can start scooping up my drones. But I'm trying to keep track of D-scan because I don't want him to come in. If he does come in, I want to be as close to the beacon as possible so that way I can grab him. So yeah, anybody who comes into the Plex is going to come in at within 2 kilometers of the beacon. And then everybody has to stay within 30 kilometers of this little structure here that we call the button, in order for credit to, in order to be able to run the timer. Also, there is no cloaking within range of the button, so there's like a 30-kilometer shield around the button, an invisible shield that prevents decloaking, or sorry, prevents cloaking. In fact, you can even see that when you hover over it. We can see that there's... Oh, never mind, they got rid of it. There used to be a thing that says the range, and then another one that said 0 kilometers. And that one that said 0 kilometers was because it was actually a 30-kilometer wide bubble. There are some ships that are not allowed in the plexes at all, and also ships that have warp core stabilizers in them or on them are not allowed inside of the plex. I can't grab my last drone. Ooh. So I did recover like 4 million, well, almost 5, probably 5 million off of my wreck. So that's not bad. The one dude in system now is not the same guy as before. I don't know if he's going to come in or not, or what he's in. So, sorry, I talked about this. You can do the... Okay, so the slicer. Oof. Oof. Well, if a slicer comes in here, that will be rough, but I think I have a solution for it if it does happen. So you can see here, I'm switching between one AU to see what's exactly on gate with me in the event that somebody decides to show up. And then I also swap to 360, or sorry, 14 AU to see if there's anything else going on. There's another Tristan named Plexin. That'll be an interesting one. Again, that could theoretically come in. That one, man, the problem with the Tristan is that it can be so many different things, right? It could be a blaster Tristan, it could be a rail Tristan, it could be a whole new Tristan. So it's hard to predict what kind of fighting profile it will have. The slicer is definitely going to want to be a kiter, real fast and energy reliant, but I don't think I'm going to be able to... I mean, you saw how easily that Vigil fleet issue got away from me. So if the slicer comes in, I pretty much rely... Like, he's going to be able to kite me out if he wants to. So that's why I've got warrior drones. Warrior drones are stupid fast. And the Algos gets a speed bonus on them. So if in the event that I see the slicer, I'm going to pull in my heavier drones and pull out my warrior drones to hopefully chase him down. There he is. So we're going to pull in these drones and just let this dude kind of be a thing. I'm probably going to have to fight both of these guys, potentially. So, spooky, spooky. There he comes. Oh no! Fuck! I did the bad thing! I did the wrong thing! Fuck! Okay, well... That's a mistake that I should not have made. But wait. I might be able to make it. Probably not. Probably not. But maybe? I doubt it. Nope. Damn it. Ah, okay. Golly. That was just bad piloting. Okay, so what did we learn here? What we learned here was fucking delock the rat before the enemy comes in. Right? Because my habit, I guess this is just going to be the how to get rid of the rust, knock the rust off of you. But, so, okay. First of all, that was a bad matchup. But second of all, the biggest thing there was that I had the rat locked. So then when I hit all my modules to go after the slicer, as I was locking the slicer, I didn't even think about the fact that all of the modules that could act on the rat instead started acting on the rat, which means they didn't act on him, which means I didn't get him quite as fast as I should have. So that was that mistake. And again, like, Slicers are nasty as shit. Slicers are very, very nasty. I mean, you saw how fast that thing was able to damage me. Even comparison to the Vigil Fleet issue, right? Like that small focus pulse laser. He was also scram kiting me though. Not as much of a kitey as I would have expected him to be.
Warp drive active.
So now what we can do is, if we really want to, we can pull up chat, put him in here, copy it, go to Zkill, pop his name in there. Hopefully he's lost a slicer recently. There he did. All right, great. So this is the slicer that probably killed me. This is actually a pretty interesting fit. Is this... was I not scrammed the whole time? Oh man. This is actually a fun one. This is actually true. So a lot of fits, some fits in faction warfare will not even fit a point because they expect the person to he makes YouTube videos. Excellent. So yeah, very rarely fits a scram because you don't need to. Like as you saw, I was very fixated. Didn't even think about it. So good kill on him. I can grab this, copy it, then jump back into game. And simulate from clipboard. And flag. He was doing 300 DPS with that slicer. That's pretty legit. Slicers are so good when they're used correctly, and obviously he knows what he's doing. He did everything right, and I did a few things wrong. Well, man, this is normally I'm used to faction warfare being kind of quiet a lot, but this has been not that. Let's see. Let's try one more Nephthys. This is why you definitely want to stage like a whole bunch of copies of a certain ship. Like this is why you want to, like, if you're getting into faction warfare, it's useful to find a couple of ships that you want and then get a whole bunch of copies of it and move them into position, because you can lose ships pretty quickly. I don't always lose ships this quickly. Obviously, this has been kind of surprising, honestly. Just because the last few times that we've been in here, it's been kind of quiet. But this is good. This is good content. All right, we're going to go grab these three, put them in. And let's go. I wonder if he's going to finish running that site. Probably not. So we're just going to slowly but surely continue to finish this one medium site.
Warp drive active.
He's a content creator and he didn't even GF me. Oh. Yeah, it's true. Well, again, like, that's not... The point is that you're going to make mistakes in any given fight. So being able to analyze your mistakes and figure out how to improve, like, that's how you get better, right? And I'm just glad that people are taking fights. It's better than being bored, right?
Warp drive active.
Now, again, especially if you're a newer player, you can always opt out of those fights. In both of those cases, I saw who that they were on the gate, and I had plenty of time to leave if I had wanted to, or at least get away from the entry point to try to like warp off if they do come in. Well, it is back to being empty again. So, by the way, if you notice, every single time I warp to a Plex, I warp at range. I don't warp at 0. It's generally good to not warp to acceleration gates at 0 and instead warp at 10, although some acceleration gates don't work correctly. But Faction Warfare Plexes in particular, you can actually activate the gate up to, I think 100 kilometers away, definitely 70 kilometers away. So it's useful and valuable to warp to it at range, because that way, if there is somebody like holding on the gate, it's harder for them to catch you. And then also, you don't accidentally bounce on the gate or any of the geometry. Yeah, there are a few people that fly slicers that really obsess over them, because it's one of those things that if you fly them well, you can fly them very, very well. And slicers are also kind of they're a good training thing for kiting and for scram kiting. And also, they, like other ships like the Succubus and such, that are also really, really good in those sort of fields. Like the Slicer is a good training ship for those slightly more, like even more crazy fits and setups, like pirate ships. Oh, he did take most of my stuff. Good for him. But now there's like basically nobody in local, so it's going to be quiet. And I've only got 6.5 minutes left to get to finish the site. This is a command operations system, and it is only 5.1% contested. So if this was back in the day, or like in my old guide, you'd be getting like 4% of the total LP. This site would basically not be worth running. But thanks to the latest changes, where they added the extra rats into the sites and changed the way payouts work, as long as this system is not stable, which it is not, it is 5.1% contested at the moment. As long as the system isn't stable, I can still get full rewards for being in here. What's up, Freedom? New rats. Now, it's also worth, in some of these sites, it's worth looting the rats once you've killed them. If I remember correctly, I went and looked, and the dog tags I got off of these rats were not that great. I think it's well, I think it's different per race. So you gotta check to see which dog tags of yours ends up being like the valuable ones that are worth looting. It's not always the one that you would expect. So, anyway, as I was saying before, there's kind of 3 states to descan that I use. Oh, see, look, I'm scrammed right now, or warp disrupted by one of the rats. That's spooky. That's true. They can drop Skinner components, as pretty much everything can. But so I've got 3 states that I use my descan in, right? I've got the 360 1 AU. So that way I can see if anything's on the gate. Not that that's helped me out very much. And then I've got my maximum range 360. This is just to help me figure out what's even in the system with me. You know, like if I know that there's nothing in gate, or if there's a hostile that comes into system, I might swap to 360 just so I can see as early as possible what they're in. And then when they show up there, then you can bump down to lower states and watch them kind of come in towards you to see if that's what's going to happen. But then the other way I use descan is by setting it to maximum range Why? Come on, drones. And 5 degree, right? With 5 degree, it's only a very narrow cone for the D-scan range. And that is controlled by the position of the camera. In fact, if we open up the probe window, we can see this like cone of D-scan. And if I move my camera, you can watch that cone move, right? So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the D-scan key, and I've got the different beacons in space, right? And I can hold the D-scan key and click on one, and it snaps the camera to it, and it scans it. So, like, let's say if I did the 360 and I saw a frigate in there, right? A frigate in space. I could then switch to 5 degree and begin de-scanning the different places and seeing whether or not they are at that particular location. So I'll be able to check and see that this scout at the moment is empty, right? So those are the 3 different ways I use D-scan. Max range 360, max range, occasionally you see apocalypses. Max range 1 AU or shorter, and then 5 degree max range. You want 0.1 AU to make sure that they're on the gate. Yeah, so that is actually one of the issues, is that like the lowest one by default that you get is like 1 degree. Although 0.01, oh yeah, never mind, they added the 0.01. And this one, 0.01 will basically ensure that it almost ensures that you only get what's on the gate with you, right? There's sometimes, like not right now, but there are 2 stations within 2 AU of me. So if I had my range at 2 AU, now I'm also going to see people that are on the gate, not just, or sorry, on the station, not just on my outside of my gate. So that is something to keep in mind. The 0.01 AU, which is a newer one, is very good for knowing what's on your gate. There is a suspect in system, and those are always kind of interesting because, so pirates can come into the site, but if they do, oh, I've got a Thrasher fleet issue on gate, but chances are that's going to be a friendly because there's 2 of them and there's 2 allies. Friendly is a bit of a possible misnomer, obviously. They could theoretically AWOX me or something. But they would lose standings if they did. So oftentimes you don't, like, it is not advantageous to kill your own allies. But, you know, sometimes people do. Especially if they're being territorial. But here comes the 2 Thrasher fleet issues. They're coming in. Now, so because this is a -1 site, if they were to stay here, this will cut my reward for this site in by a third. Which is why it's kind of considered rude to come in this late into the site, which is, I think, probably why they're heading out, right? They're coming in, seeing what the timer's at, seeing what the state of the Plex is at, and then heading out because they see that I've got it, and them being here would just make, like, basically take from me. And that's what gets people upset, and that's what leads to things like AWOXing and stuff. So they're moving on. And that's one of the things I really, really like about faction warfare in general, and why I like faction warfare. I've talked about this in some other videos before, but it's the idea of like building your mental model of what is going on around you based on the various different tools that you have at your disposal, right? So with the map, with local, with directional scanner, and with like historical record or memory, I can kind of keep track of what is going on, who's in what, who is where, who's doing what, right? So I now know those 2 Thrashers are roaming around looking for sites, but they're relatively friendly, right? And I know that that Slicer's still roaming around, probably, and also that other one. And so like if I see them, you know, if I see Murdeneth or whatever, I immediately know probably what he's in, etc., etc. So I maintain this mental model of what's going on in the universe, or in, you know, in the system especially, in order to kind of keep track of what risks I have. And I still have 2 people in local with me that I have not yet identified what they might be in. Black Frog logistics, almost certainly if not a threat. And this guy's Caldari State, which is weird, because, like, it used to be that Caldari and Galente were working together. Sorry, Caldari and Amar were working together, so he would have been a war target for me. But when they did Uprising, that got changed. Okay, so now I have a Condor at long, but not on short. So he's somewhere in the system, but not on the gate, and that's fine, because there's lots of things within that range that it could be. If a Condor was to come in, once again, I'd want to go with, like, my super faster drones and try my best to catch them. This ship is honestly not very good at catching faster ships. That's kind of one of its weaknesses, which is why these Scram Kiters have been able to punish me. But again, like, one of the things that's really good about this ship is that it can run plexes all day without really worrying about it too much. Okay, so I've got a war target in system. I'm going to want to check to see if there's anything new that shows up on D-Scan now that there's this war target in system. So that way I can start guessing what it is. There's a Prowler, but a Prowler's a hauler. So if that is what he is, then that's not a problem. And there's a Rifter. So if he's a Rifter might be juicy. Again, I'm not 100% stoked about a Rifter because I'd rather... My optimal thing to fight is something that require... This is a Navy, right? Yeah. So this Orthrus can't get in here. My optimal enemy is an enemy that wants to be within 6 kilometers, because that's my newt range, but also wants to use their capacitor. So... say a blaster boat, another blaster boat of some kind, or technically, again, like, that slicer could have been good for me if I have done it correctly. Like, if I had slammed my newts on it right away and kept them running on it correctly, it would have potentially been bad for him. This is why, like, my Hull Newt Tristan did successfully kill a Daredevil. Because if you can manage to newt out a ship that requires capacitor for their guns, then you're good to go. Dragoon. Okay, a Dragoon could be fun. I'm 14 seconds away from it being finished. Is he going to come in before it gets finished and ruin my Plex? No. I'm still going to stay here and take the fight, though. Here he comes. All right, and... this is going not terrible for me. I don't need that. That can go. And now I can start repping. He's newting me, I'm newting him. But I have the advantage, so he dies.
Has run out of charges.
Okay.
The capacitor is empty.
And I don't get the pod. GF in local. Good kill. 8 million. What did he drop? He dropped Acolytes. See, so he dropped Acolytes. I think if he... well, he did not do any damage to me. So whatever he did, it was not sufficient to kill... like, I can't think of a way to improve it that would have been that much better. Well, I guess I was repping. But still, like, didn't even scratch my hull, which I'm hull tanked. But I did also manage to capture the site. So let's go ahead and see how much that was worth. Oh, wait, I got a mail. Oh, hey! Coming month, I'm raffling away some exclusive Slicer skins to celebrate 3K solo kills without using a point. As my victim. You get 1 ticket for your loss. All right. You can win one of the following slicer skins. Okay. If you want to participate, please reply to this message. Go with God M. So this guy's a good streamer, I guess. Or a content creator. Hey, man. You killed me on stream. Grats. Send me your link and I will post it in my stream. 07. That's cool. I mean, everybody's got to have a shtick, and he's got a good one. And he makes good skins, too. All right. Where else was I, though? I was in the middle of looking up loyalty points. I got loyalty points for killing him. I got 3,000 loyalty points for killing that, that dragoon. And then I got 20,000 loyalty points for finishing this site. So basically that one kill and this site bought one of my algoses. Now granted, obviously I lost 2 in order to do it, but I didn't have to. I could have been a lot more conservative about my stuff, but you can see like the potential's there. That's good amount of ISK. It was like what, 15-20 minutes? So 1 million ISK a minute for doing PvP. And I can just reload and keep going. There is that medium advanced. Oh, we're going to do something slick. We're going to do something slick. See if it works. Probably won't, but probably won't do anything, but we'll see. If we go to number of jumps. Yeah, baby.
Warp drive active.
So we'll see if this ends up making my feelings hurt or if this ends up working. Wrong ammo. What do you mean? The Dragoon doesn't have any guns. He was relying on his drones. He did a Nosses instead of Newts, which was interesting. I would have expected it to be Newts. I don't think that's a very good fit. But, so now we're going to do something a little bit dirty. Which is, I have this ship here. And the cool thing about this ship, as a recon ship, is that it's invisible to D-scan, right? So I've been talking a lot about how you can use D-scan in order to get your protection and all that sort of stuff. Well, this guy can't be seen on D-scan. So, but it's a Tech 2 cruiser. So it can only be allowed in advanced mediums and larges, which luckily we have an advanced medium. So we're going to head there. I'm going to check 360 degrees. I don't see any rats, or I don't see anybody on D-scan here. So either there's nobody in that site, or there's another recon in the site. One of the two. But now I can just sit inside this site, and nobody can see me. And so if somebody comes in thinking it's empty, then they get got. Curses are so nasty for that. And it's the reason why earlier I said I don't like medium advanced or large advanced complexes because of the possibility of these things being in there. But it is actually better when you have like a buddy, so that way you have like somebody who is on D-scan but is, you know, just a normal dude, the bait, as it were. And I don't want to be on the plex or on the gate with this one. I have a warp disruptor, so I want to be a little bit... No way. No. Okay. I do want to not necessarily be directly on the beacon with this ship because it has good range with my newts. It's got 15 to 24 kilometer optimal range with newts, and then it's also got the warp disruptor, which is 20 kilometers. So I want to be like 15 kilometers from the beacon when somebody shows up, more likely than not. So we're just going to sit right here at, we're going to go with 12. That'll be fine. We just, once again, this is also kind of a drone boat, so we're just going to let our drones do the work. Now, one thing I do want to do, I think one of the big videos that I'm going to do next, I have my top 10 recommendations for newer players that I would like to cover at some point soon, but also I have been having a lot of requests for, oh, we put the entire corp in. There's been a lot of requests for a guide on drones and E-War. Now, I still need to actually edit out the armor tanking thing. Golly, I'm so bad at getting around to editing. I'm so sorry, guys. That's my biggest weakness right now. But we did do the tanking guide a couple weeks ago. And so the next one is probably, I want to think that you can get drones and E-War in to a single video, but I'm always making my videos too long. So maybe not. I don't know. Chances are this Plex is going to be a little bit quiet. Maybe we could do those segments in between Plex, or while we're doing Plexes potentially, but then they get interrupted, and I don't know. So, yeah. More rats. It would be kind of funny to put a mobile tractor unit down here if you can. Yeah, most E-War boats that you like are drone boat. There is a big there is a big crossover between the two. Although, well, kind of. Because most proper E-War are mid slots, but some of the stuff is high slots in particular, especially like newts. Although newts are kind of fun because like there's a few questions in Eve, right? Like, are orcas capitals? You know, is the Odysseus Tech 2? Are newts E-War? Because like each race has usually two kinds of E-War, right? Caldari are the exception. They've only got jams. But like Galente have points and disruptors, or dampeners rather. Mimitar have webs and target painters. And Amar have weapon disruption, tracking disruptors and missile disruptors. But then they also have newts. And newts are basically like an electronic warfare, but they're different in several different ways. One, they're high slots where the rest of the E-War are basic. I think, yeah, all of the rest of the E-War are mid slots. And while most of the E-War do something by affecting your stats, you know, damps affect your lock range, target painters make you bigger, webs make you slower, jams make render your locks. You can only lock the enemy target. The newts actually function much more like a weapon system than other E-Wars. It's just rather than attacking the person's armor and shields and hull, they're attacking your capacitor, right? It uses capacitor to attack the enemy capacitor. So I know like a while ago, back in the day, it was a lot more controversial to suggest that newts are E-War. But I think we've kind of gotten onto the side that newts are considered a kind of E-War, right? Bearski's here. That's not one of the guys I've already fought. So we don't know what he's in, I don't think. It's useful. This is why I'm like keeping an eye on it, because like even if he doesn't come in here right now, finding out what he's in can be valuable. Oh, he's in a hound. You're not coming in here. That'd be so cool if you did, but you're not coming in here as a hound. A hound isn't going to go into a medium advanced. Has no place in a medium advanced. None of these rats have loot. That's unfortunate. Yeah, the Griffin Navy issue is so strong. That might be one of the ones to play with in the next couple of days. I mean, the Griffin can be good too, but the Griffin is obviously like not really a solo ship. You're a very much a force multiplier. But a Griffin Navy issue is like all in one, baby. Okay. Oh. Does this guy... Where's this thing? AmarVictor.com. Okay. How's the Mollusk Navy issue? The Mollusk Navy issue is... First of all, the Mollusk Navy issue is the Tristan Navy issue, right? Like, it isn't... In a lot of ways, it kind of serves that point because it's a Navy ship that also has 5 drones. So, if a Mollusk Navy issue is being used... Wait, no, that's an Imicus Navy issue. That's an Imicus Navy issue. Let me start over. The Mollusk Navy issue exists for one purpose and one purpose alone. To kill warp-stabbed things, right? Like, the Mollusk Navy issue... Well, first of all, take a step back. All of the Navy issue frigates are are special snowflakes when it comes to EWAR. For the most part, with most EWAR, not newts, but the rest of EWAR, well, a lot of the EWAR, they have very good ranges, right? Target painters, damps, even jams. A lot of these ships, the whole point of them is that they can affect things pretty far away from them, right? Well, with the Navy frigates, for the EWAR frigates, they actually are much more brawly. They're like, they answer the question like, well, what if EWAR was more closer range, Scramkite or brawly range, right? Which is, you know, where they are stronger. So, but with the Mollusk Navy issue, it's a very, very specific point to it, which was actually at the time, you know how I said that warp core stabilizers are no longer not allowed inside of faction warfare sites? Well, that wasn't always true. Hey, look, an Algos. Golly, wouldn't it be great if that Algos came into the medium? Oh no, I just realized that wait, I just realized something. I'm so dumb. So my curse cannot be seen on D-scan, but my drones can. So, like, it may not be too bad, but with my drones out, somebody can see that I'm in here. Or at least they'll see that there are drones in here, and there are wrecks in here. So maybe they'll think that somebody got killed in here. Either way. So the Mollusk Navy issue. So back in the day, you could have warp core stabilizers in plexes. And even back then, you could have multiple warp core stabilizers on a single ship. And so there was a pretty popular strategy, mostly by the Caldari, mostly popularized by, I think, Test Alliance back in the day, to, rather than having combat capable ships, you just bring a ship that's like warp core stabbed out to hell. So that way, even if you do get caught, you can just warp away. Now, obviously, that's extremely lazy, especially since I even demonstrated that if you pay any amount of attention whatsoever, you can see who's going to come before they come in, and therefore you can just leave if you want to. So the only reason why you'd want a warp core stabilizer is if you're not paying attention and you still want to get away once somebody even comes into the site. You're not going to be combat capable because warp core stabilizers ruin your combat capability. But either way, there is still this problem of warp core stabilizers, especially in plexes, but also just in general. People don't like, people that hunt people don't like warp core stabilizers. And thus, the Malis Navy issue was born. The Malis Navy issue, its big thing is that it has that big bonus to warp core, to warp scramblers. In fact, so like I said earlier, most of these ships are designed to be in kind of a brawly-ish or a shorter range kind of setup. Interestingly enough, the Malis Navy issue, because of the fact that scrams are so short range by definition, we actually get a range bonus to scrams, so that way it can scram somebody at basically warp disruptor range, which is by itself really good, right? Because if you can damp them and scram them and keep it range, you can basically make it so that they can't hurt you, which is kind of neat. But the biggest bonus on the Malis Navy issue, the thing that actually makes the Malis Navy issue shine, is this +2 scramble strength to warp scramblers. And the reason why that's so good now, in particular, is because if you think about it, so a scram has 2 points. This has +2 points. So it's 4 points for a warp scrambler, right? Now, a base ship has 1 point, and a warp core stabilizer gives 2 points. So any normal ship with a warp core stabilizer can still be caught with a Malis Navy issue. The Venture has 2 points of built-in warp core stabilization. So does Deep Space Transports, which gives them 3 points of warp core by default, which means that the Malis Navy issue can scram any of them without any problem whatsoever, unless they have a warp core stabilizer. If you have a ship, yeah, they're mostly all gate camp fits because of what I'm explaining right now. So if you have a ship that is warp core stabilized and it's bonus for warp core stability, like a Venture or a Deep Space Transport, then it has 5 points of total warp core stability. But there are 2 ways of getting around that. There is faction warp core stabilizer, there's faction warp scrams, which are actually worth 3 points instead of 2. And also Gallente owned eating comm systems. Any Minor Victory or Eating comm Fortress out there that is owned by a Gallente originally will have a bonus to warp scrams within that system. And so in either of those cases, either a Malis Navy issue with a faction scram or one of those special systems will mean that the Malis Navy issue actually has 5 points of warp core stability or scramming, which means with a single scram, a Malis Navy issue can stop any warp in the game that isn't like capital. So that's where the Malis Navy issue comes in play, which is why you're going to see them almost exclusively in gate camps. They're not very combat effective on their own. Like I said, they can do this like sort of mid-range scram, but even then, like being able to damp them out to the point where they can't lock you at like 15 kilometers can be still kind of hard, especially for some of the bigger ships with longer lock ranges. And ultimately, it's not more combat capable than like a Tristan. So they're probably the least versatile of the E-War combat frigates, Navy combat frigates. But again, it has that very, very, very specific purpose, which is that if you hate warp core stabilizers, Malis Navy issue is your answer. Now, if you want an E-War frigate that will fucking dunk Well, the Vigil Fleet issue that we saw earlier, very good Scram Kiter. Basically does a better version. I'm not even killing the rat when I should be. Ah! The Vigil Fleet issue, it works very good, very similar to a hook bill in being able to like web and hold at scram range and kill the person. But I would say that of them, the E-War frigate that I think actually kind of wins out in the Navy is the Griffin Navy issue. Because the Griffin Navy issue, they actually got screwed over by the scram, or by the changes originally, but now they're good. So, you know, back in the day when you jammed somebody with jams, it would completely prevent them from being able to lock anybody, right? But then they changed it so that way you can, when you jam somebody, it actually is basically like a taunt. The only person that you can lock up while you're jammed is a ship that is jamming you, you know? So if multiple ships are jamming you, you can lock any of the ones that are successfully jamming you. Everybody else can't be locked. So that was a problem for the Griffin Navy issue when this change was made, because, you know, again, these things want to be brawly. And so the idea that it could jam you while close, like most jamming ships you'll see have extremely long range. Because the idea is that you sit so far out of range of the person that you jam them, so that way they can only target you, but then you're so far away that they can't do anything to you while your allies are, you know, messing them up. That's kind of the idea behind most jamming ships nowadays. But obviously, that doesn't work with the Griffin Navy issue. It wants to be close. So what they did was they moved the bonus for the jam to the drones of the Griffin Navy issue. Because if the drones are the thing that jams you, you cannot lock the actual Griffin, because the Griffin's not jamming you, the drones are. And so it becomes like the only solo jam boat in the game, which is kind of fun. The Crucifier Navy issue is pretty good, but it's kind of competing in a position that has a lot of competition. Even the normal Crucifier, the Slicer, really any kitey, although, well, yeah. Crucifier Navy issue can be good, although honestly, weapon disruption is probably one of the harder E-Wars to get right. Jams too, but obviously the Griffin Navy issue uses just jam drones, which don't care. So normally you would have to have the correct color for the thing that you're trying to jam. But with weapon disruption, at least with jams, if you're using the wrong kind of jammer, you still at least have a chance of getting a jam successful. But if you have the wrong kind of weapon disruption, it's worthless, right? You can either you can disrupt missiles or you can disrupt turrets, and it requires a module change in order to change between the two, which makes it incredibly vulnerable to having to rely on having the correct kind of fight. So of them, I think that probably the Vigil Navy issue is the most just like workhorse, practical effectiveness combat frigate. The Griffin Navy is like pretty gimmicky, but cool. The Maulus Navy issue is specially purposed for gate camps / scrams, or, you know, whatever, specifically grabbing somebody, especially people that are warp core stabilized. And the Crucifier Navy issue is basically a Slicer Navy issue. Now the exploration frigates, though, those are newer, the Navy exploration frigates, and they are actually pretty cool. Like the combat, they are combat probing, combat effective explorers. So all 4 of the combat explorer frigates are pretty fun. The Amicus Navy issue is the Tristan Navy issue that I was thinking about earlier. I know Spoons actually does a lot with the Mollis Navy issue. Not Mollis, Amicus Navy issue. So we've got 2 minutes left on this site. Obviously, I kind of messed around a couple of minutes because I forgot to attack the rat a couple of times because I'm not used to the new setup. The Carries Navy gets a lot of drones too. There's no Carries Navy. Carries is a T2. Faction Warfare is great, and the changes that they've made are great. Yeah. The Warp Jam one. You mean the Mollis Navy issue? Well, the Carries is the Tech 2. Yeah, the Mollis Navy issue is fine. That's what we were talking about. But it isn't... There are other kind of better... It doesn't necessarily outcompete the Tristan in its own role. Yeah, the Carries only gets 2 drones. And the Mollis Navy issue... Yeah, the Mollis Navy issue does get 5 drones. No, okay, hold on. All right, so this gets drone hit points and tracking speed. Which tracking speed is such a weird thing to give to drones that aren't sentries. But so if you notice, there's no damage bonus here at all, but it does get 5 drones. And then we go to the Amicus Navy. Oh, I just got, wow, I got 24,000 loyalty points. I got 25,000 loyalty points for this site. So that's good. So the Amicus Navy. Hold on. I gotta dock this up first. The Amicus Navy gets... Oh, yeah, this also gets hit points and tracking speed, but it does get hybrid turret damage, although what's weird about that is we often put newts on it instead. It gets the core scanner probes. And then the Tristan... Hold on, let's just make sure we double check this. Drone ban... Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough, fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. Arguably, you could argue that maybe, or at least better, it gets the 5 drones instead of 4. I was just wrong. This is why you verify your assumptions. Yeah, 25 bandwidth there. Hit points and tracking speed. Tracking speed. So... Does that mean that a Mollis can actually outperform a Tristan in damage? Maybe. Well, not outperform, but equal? Maybe that's worth looking into. I don't think so, though. Hold on. We go compare, and then... Mollusk Navy. Imicus Navy. Let's see. Only show values that differ. The Imicus Navy does come with 4 mid slots, which is better than the 3 mid slots of the Tristan or the Mollusk Navy issue. So theoretically speaking, it can do a little bit better when it comes to catching things. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's also a little bit faster. And it has more CPU. I feel like the Mollusk Navy issue could be good, but the problem is, okay, actually the real problem with the Mollusk Navy issue is that if you're trying to do damps, like you've got damps, web, scram, and prop. Wait, hold on. Damps, web, scram, and prop. That's 4 things. It has 3 mid slots. So the Mollusk Navy issue is going to sacrifice something, and that's even if you don't have like a capacitor booster or anything like that. So, I don't know, man. And ultimately, the problem is that, yeah, you're going to be spending a lot more for basically the same thing. But I'll have to talk to Spoons about the difference between a Mollusk Navy issue and an Imicus Navy issue, because he really does like the Imicus Navy issue. Now I'm curious as to why. All right, so we can go back to my Nephthys. Do light drones need tracking bonus? Medium drones seem to miss a lot more, but would you even use mediums? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, tracking bonuses on a light drone is kind of weird. And even with medium drones, a lot of times that you'll miss is often because you're not fast enough, not because you're not tracking enough. I can't seem to recall the Ishkar being an upgrade to the Tristan, but that was so long ago prior to all the ship rebalancing. It is. Oh yeah. Like the Ishkar is the Tech 2 step up. Right? It has but it also, oh yeah, no, it's just straight up the Tech 2 Tristan, because it's got the 5 it's got 5 light drones in its drone bay, but it doesn't have, well, it does have the hit point bonus, and it does have damage bonus to hybrid turrets. So yeah, the Ishkar is the Tech 2 Tristan, basically. All right. The system is at 4.5%, so I can continue to plex in the system. Let's actually dock real quick and drop some of this stuff off in here. I also seem to recall throwing 5 drones out of a frig was super rare. Yes, correct. That's why, like, I keep on calling it like the Tristan, because I remember when they did the rebalance of stuff, like the Tristan became like the only frigate that could do 5 drones at first, and now a couple other frigates have gotten it too. But yeah, it's considered a pretty special thing.
Docking permission requested. Docking request accepted.
Do you think this Eve Frontier CCP is streaming now will be any good and last more than 2 years? I've played it a few times. It is like, it's definitely got potential, and it's got a growing fan base. So, like, it's a very different experience than EVE Online, because EVE Online, you are living in a society that's kind of already structured. You know, I'm in a NPC station right now, and while there are technically NPC stations in Eve Frontiers, it very much more is about space colonization. You and your buddies going out into the black, into the middle of nowhere, and building your little colony, and then going and discovering like all sorts of weird stuff. So, does it have a growing fan base outside of people who play Eve? Actually, interestingly enough, like so far, the fan base of Eve Frontiers and Eve Online are largely separate, because a lot of Eve players are being dismissive of it out of hand because it's crypto and because it's just another Eve. Whereas like the fact that it's crypto and the fact that it is this kind of strange libertarian utopia in virtual space, it's attracted an entirely different kind of player. But we're not really going to see its potential because, like I said, it's kind of about this like living in this alternative universe in a very real sandboxy kind of way, even beyond what Eve Online has. And yet it still now is getting wiped every month or two. So we're not really seeing its potential yet. Everybody who's kind of playing with it is still just kind of tinkering with it. But does it have potential? Absolutely. We'll just have to see, because as I've said before, my biggest concern with Eve Frontiers is honestly that it kind of functions as a wish list, a dream software product for CCP, you know, their chance to start over again and do it right, do it the way that they would like to do it. And so like my biggest concern is that if Eve Frontiers does gain popularity, there's kind of an incentive for CCP to love it more, but we'll see. I do hope it does well for CCP. Not much interest to me, but it would be nice for them to get a win besides Eve. Yeah. Although, I mean, like, it really is like, it is a lot like Eve. Saying it is besides Eve is a bit of a misnomer. The nice thing about it, though, is that it is basically a totally separate project. They got funding exclusively for that project. You know, I like to say that there was, you know, $40 million worth of startup funds, or, you know, like investment funds in the crypto world, just kicking around looking for something to invest in. And Hilmar convinced them that the framework of Eve Online would make the perfect kind of context for a blockchain based you know, system. And they're not wrong. Right? Like this whole idea of like the sandbox game, and it's the player universe, and it's this living story, like those essences of that make Eve Online so special are very much accentuated by the idea of being a blockchain based, you know, game. Like it even says in the white page verse, one of the things that they're trying to do is get to a point where like CCP is arguably not even a necessary component of it, right? If all of the rules of the game, all of the space physics as they call it, and all of the things happening in the game, like Stargates and player buildings and all that stuff, if all of the data for that stuff is maintained on the blockchain, and the client slash whatever server infrastructure ends up theoretically being necessary is open sourced, which are things that they're trying to do, then arguably, as long as the blockchain that it's built on exists, the game can exist, or at least be reconstructed independently, regardless of who controls it. And that's a big piece of like what CCP is trying to do, is to make it like Eve Online is still a fictional universe. The things in it are still owned by CCP. I can't sell you this Algos for $5 because it's not mine. It's CCP's, and I get to play it because I pay CCP money. But the way that they're doing with Frontiers is like, because it's on the blockchain, arguably the thing that I put down is mine, right? So if I wanted to sell it, or if I wanted to do something like with real money trading in E Frontiers, it's totally legit. Again, kind of where they're going with it. But so it has a lot of potential, but it is a very different end goal with what kind of game it wants to make, in the fact that like Eve is more of a political drama kind of game, whereas Eve Frontiers is much more a space colonization game. Yeah, We've played it a few times. You can see some of my streams about it. Definitely an interesting concept, and thanks for the info. Do you know if Echoes brings in good returns for them? I don't think Echoes brings them shit. I don't, like... First of all, so Eve Frontiers is made by CCP. Eve, what is it? The Eve Eve Galaxy Conquest is made by CCP. Eve Echoes is licensed by CCP to, I think, Tencent. So pretty much most people, like, if anyone's making money off of Echoes, it'd be Tencent, most likely, most of it. And I haven't played Echoes in at least a couple of years, but every time I hear something from the Echo side of things, it's just a shit show. So now, why am I, why? Oh no, do I not have, do I need a implant and I don't have it? Well, that sucks. I occasionally search Eve videos and then I watch a vid and it looks weird and I realize I'm looking at Echoes. Yeah. Well, like, so Eve Echoes has a Concorde carrier that players can get that is the only capital that can be flown in HiSec. And so Eve Echoes, in my opinion, exists to deal with people that say that they want to get rid of ganking, right? Because, like, I hear this all the time. This is, in my opinion... Wait, the only thing I like from Echoes is the various precursor ships? Wait, there's precursor ships in Echoes? I know they... I mean, they have the one for... They have the Yanyong ships that was introduced at the very beginning, and then they did absolutely nothing with the Yanyong after that point. But there's other precursor ships? I don't even know where they're at right now. I need a skin on this thing. This is my VNI. I love it. It's also good. And it'll go into this Medium Navy 3. Infiltrators are heavy, right? No. No, yeah. Wait. Oh, yeah, that's right. Like, my loadout is weird now. I've got Praetors, Hammerheads, and a Warrior? Is that gonna work? That's 5. Great. And this one also doesn't necessarily want to be close by. They have real dumb-looking ship skins, too, like giant holographic fists flying around in ships and stuff. Like, what the fuck? I want that. That is one thing I think that Eve Echoes actually does pretty good, is that, like, the bombastic skins. Like, screw it. Whatever. We're space gods. We should be able to fly. Why is my nude offline? It's a NOS. And because this fit actually requires an implant in order to fully fit it. So, to deal with that, I just offlined the NOS because it's kind of bonus. I mean, I've got 2 cap boosters, so it's not like the NOS is, like, going to save my day, most likely, too. Oh, why do I have a warp scrambler if I want to be at range? Oh god, an Ishkur. An Ishkur. Ishkur. This could be bad. Oh no, he's off. So, like, every once in a while, I see people complaining that ganking exists in EVE. And the people that are complaining about this are almost invariably either a miner or a hauler, right? Because those are the guys that get ganked the most. And I like to remind people that, like, as much as you don't like him, as much as it's a negative experience to be ganked, and as much as it feels like it's an asshole thing for a player to do to you, ganking is a very essential component to the hauling and mining playstyle. Because, like, so, okay, a little bit of game theory here, or, like, you know, game design theory. So first of all, going back to Sid Meier's, not Sid Meier's himself, but one of the guys who worked on Civilization was it Sid Meier's himself? No, I think it was, either way, whatever. There's this quote that says that games are about making meaningful decisions, right? So no, you're right. It is Sid Meier's. The other guy that I was thinking about, the quote from the other guy that's thinking about, wait, hold on. No, he can't get in here. Given the opportunity, a player will optimize the fun out of their own game. That was the other quote that I'm thinking about. That's not what we're talking about. Video games are a series of meaningful decisions, right? And that's what makes games fun, is having to make meaningful decisions. A good example of where this is important is, like, in World of Warcraft, you know, there's the talent trees. Now, a long time ago, the talent trees used to have a bunch of talents that were, like, just kind of gimmies. You know, they just were power boosts and stuff, and therefore there were optimal decisions. And so you just, like, rather than the talent trees being an opportunity to make creative decisions to spec your character, it basically was a test. Oh my god, an Omen Navy issue versus this. This is going to be a good fight. Let's try it out. I have no idea how this is going to go. I have no idea how this is going to go. Probably, I'm guessing badly for me. My guess is badly for me. But we're going to go for it. I'm going to lose a VNI right now. Probably. And there's a second guy in system. Never mind. I don't feel like losing a VNI right now. Yeah, fuck you. Yep. Let's get out. I see your buddy coming in. Yeah, an Omen Navy issue would be probably pretty good at dismantling me. My drones are slow. And while a Scythe is a weird backup for a Omen, definitely not what I wanted to go for. Let's go ahead and dock. The thing for me is I've never lost a blockade runner, and every time I get high set ganked, I always feel like I had the wrong gear or did something dumb. Maybe just get lucky and try to own my losses. Well, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Like, owning your own losses is an incredibly important piece to the game, right? Understanding that if you do get killed, it's because you let them, right? There's a series of decisions that you made that able to happen. It might have been because you took a risk. It might have been because you weren't paying attention or whatever, but, like, something. You made the choice to let yourself be vulnerable. Okay, yeah, so the point is that in a world in which ganking doesn't exist... my bad. Let's go back. All right, so Civilization, meaningful decisions. World of Warcraft, talent trees, not meaningful decisions. So they actually changed the talent tree to make it so that, like, there were less decision points, but because that way the decision points would be meaningful. The example in EVE is actually clone but I'm going to need a lot of bronze stuff like nails and sheets, etc. Oh, so in Eve, there used to be clone grades, right? Where your clone could only hold a certain number of skill points. And so you'd have to upgrade your clone to match the amount of skill points that you have. So that way, if you got potted, you don't lose your, you don't lose everything, right? I've got that bug where it's always warping now. The problem with that was that this is not a meaningful decision, right? No one's sitting down and being like, should I upgrade my clone? Should I save that little bit of ISK because I might not get ganked or whatever? Like, there basically was two solutions. You could either do the right thing and keep your clone up to date, or do the wrong thing and let your clone be out of date, and therefore when you get potted, you lose standing, or you lose skill points, right? And, you know, oh, should I buy the more expensive one? No. You should always buy the exact one that has the skill points that you need for your current tier. So in that world, what is presented as a choice, you can upgrade your clone or not upgrade your clone, is actually a check. Are you stupid? Did you upgrade your clone? You know, there's ways of doing it wrong. There are mistakes to be made. There's a correct way to do it. The correct way to do it is to upgrade your clone to exactly the correct state for this amount of skill points that you have. No more, no less. That's not a meaningful decision, right? That's just a check to see if you're paying attention and a tax on high skill point characters, which is why they got rid of clone grades. Which is why anytime anybody says, oh, they should bring back clone grades, I'm like, you don't really know what you're talking about, right? Like, because like, there's nothing fun there. It just makes it so that people that have high amounts of skill points are more risk adverse, even when using cheaper equipment, because it costs them a lot in order to, you know, fix it, or, you know, to replace their clone. There's no interesting decision there, so they got rid of it, right? What even brought this on? Oh yeah, great. So now another concept, a game that most of you have probably played before, is Mario Brothers, right? And in Mario Brothers, when you first play the game, you know, just picture in your mind that first frame. You know, you have that line of blocks with the block above it, and there's the two Goombas that are moving towards you, right? This is seen as like a very classic example of what people think of when they like good tutorial. Is it doing? Hold on. What just happened? My computer did the thing that spooks me out again. I'm closing extra stuff.